Good morning, Livingston, and welcome to a special program here on Livingston Education on the topic of systemic racism. I'm Mike Raymer, and with me are my co-hosts, Debbie Kirshen, Earl Smith, and guest co-host, Fal Pandya. And welcome to our 5 panelists, Livingston residents, Keith Hines, Janisa Arnett, Alan Golston, Simone Anthony Brown, and Anthony Keys. Thanks so much for being with us here today. For all watching, please participate in the live stream, ask questions, and post your comments. And now, I turn it over to Debbie, who will give a background for each of our panelists. Debbie?
Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Debbie Kirshen. And today we have Anthony. Anthony is actually a social studies teacher at Bradford Elementary School, right in Montclair. And he's lived in Livingston for the last 19 years. New Jersey for the last 19 years, and in Livingston since 2010. Janissa, also a teacher. She is a 9-year resident of Livingston. She's a mother of 2 Livingston High School graduates and a 4th grader. She's an algebra teacher for Montclair Public Schools, a math professor at NJIT, and a math teacher for NJIT's Upward Bound Pro. Alan is a training consultant for a software company. He has a daughter in 9th grade and a son in 4th grade. He's been in Livingston for the past 13 years. Simone's a Livingston resident of 21 years. She's an artist and the owner of Express Yourself Studios in Maplewood. Simone's a mom of 4, ranging in ages from 10 to 26. And Keith has lived in Livingston for over 40 years. He's the head deacon of the First Baptist Church of Millburn. He's also the founder of the Livingston Committee for Diversity and Inclusion about 22 years ago. So let's start this conversation about learning more about what is systemic racism. Would anybody like to jump in? What is it? What is systemic racism? Everybody knows what racism is, but what specifically is systemic racism?
I can jump in. I think that, when we look at systemic racism, we're looking at, when we think of the word racism, I think really ugly images of bigotry come out, and someone not liking someone because of their skin color. And that doesn't really define what racism is. Racism is getting or not getting something because of the color of your skin. So, for example, racist systems and systemic racism are things such as only certain people are allowed to buy houses in certain communities. This was at first legal, and then it goes from being legal to being something that's understood. So a real estate agent won't show certain people certain houses in certain neighborhoods. Or certain schools have more access because schools are funded by tax bases. So this community has schools that were ready for the pandemic because of their tax base, where other communities weren't ready for it. Certain neighborhoods have access to certain grocery stores. And so you get these food deserts in certain communities. So certain communities are going to become healthier than other communities. So these systems that that you don't see happening every day causes disparities between people because of what used to be race, but now just continues further and further ahead. So it's like trying to start a race. And I used to be a track and field coach. So you're doing a 400-meter dash. Someone gets a 100-meter start on you. So even though there's nothing legally stopping you from participating, you're so far behind in the race that there's no way you can catch up. So that's one of these things. Like I said, it's systems that have precluded people from it forever. We saw it this year in the elections as well. So that, you got to have an ID. Well, that makes sense, but why are certain communities not able to get access to IDs? So we don't ask those questions. We simply come out with what seems very logical, but not understanding what is the depth underneath why those might be restrictive programs for education, for being in the political systems.
So most people actually feel that they are not racist, and yet they are unaware of the, the unconscious bias that exists, which causes the systemic racism or institutional racism. Can you a little bit more explain, any of you, the difference between what exactly is overtly racism versus how it manifests through unconscious thoughts and biases into systemic racism?
Sure. So let me talk a little about America and America's history, because I think when we go into America's history, I think we'll get a better understanding. And a lot of people say, hey, so you should have it. It's race. There's no overt racism right now. So you should have the same opportunity as me. However, that's incorrect. And here's what I mean by that. So the first slaves, the first documented slaves that came to the Americas was in 1619. Slavery ended in 1865. So in that era, were African Americans given the same opportunity? Obviously not. So then you look at the next era, which is called Reconstruction. So that took place between 1865 and 1877. And so in the beginning of Reconstruction, what happened was you had a couple of African Americans that got elected to the legislature. But what this caused is animosity. So you saw the uprising of groups like the KKK and white supremacist groups, right? That's when they burnt down Black Wall Street. That's when African Americans were really scared and had a mass exodus out of the South, and they went to the North, right? So in that era, did we have the same opportunity? The answer is no. So now let's look at the next era, which is the Jim Crow era, because after the KKK rise, we had Jim Crow. Okay, whites use one in the South. Whites use one bathroom, blacks use another. So did we have, and also different schools. Did we have the opportunity, the same opportunity in that era? And the answer is no, right? So that's 1877 to your 1970s. That's the Jim Crow era. But then another thing happened. This isn't an era, but this is key. It's actually called the Southern Strategy. That happened in the 1970s. And so with Richard Nixon, okay, and with Barry Goldwater, they used a Southern strategy to gain political power. And they used code words like law and order. They used code words to uprise certain communities in the South. So it was difficult for anyone that was African American to uplift themselves. So then now we're in the 1970s to 1980s. So now let's look back at that. That's 370 years that African Americans did not have the same opportunity. So how in the 1990s and 2000s can you say, okay, well, start now? It's the same thing that Anthony was talking about, is that it's a huge head start.
I just add one more thing to that, Alan.
Sure.
I'm going to go back even further. I'm going to go back to 1676. And in 1676, there was something called Bacon's Rebellion that happened in the Virginia colonies. And in Bacon's Rebellion, this is when white people, Native Americans, and Black people got together and were trying to fight the oppression of the House of Burgesses. Most of the labor that was used in Virginia at that time was from indentured servitude. And after Bacon's Rebellion was squashed, the British sent troops over. They were like, we have to make sure that white people no longer try to rebel again. And so what we'll do is we will use the Africans as slaves instead, and we will make them have social structure over the enslaved Africans. So there's at least this belief of superiority. And so this belief that white is good and Black is bad institutionally happens here. If you came to the shore in 1660 and you saw a Black person, you wouldn't know if they were a slave or not. By 1700, if you saw a black person, your assumption was that person was enslaved. So the whole thought, so when we talk about anti-racism, you can be a friend of mine, but it's understood that white is superior, you know, and that issue permeates from 1676 onward, where someone was like, oh, I know a black person and they're good. It's like the Lindsey Graham comment. You can be black in South Carolina as long as you're conservative. So they're equal, but you're not equal. You're equal as long as you do things the way that I see you should be it.
I'm going to jump in now, if you don't mind, and as my dual role as moderator and as panelist, and this kind of build on what Anthony and Alan said. Simply put, we're talking about power here, people. It's all about power, perceived power, and people assume they have power. People talk about racism, they get caught up in, you know, well, they're not from the same group, or they're not from the same religious group, or they're not the same sex, they're not the same color skin. That's not really racism. Racism really comes down to power. People who have it and people who don't want other people to have it. A quick story now, and I'll open it back up to the rest of the group. My dad grew up in the Deep South, in Henry County, Alabama, a place called Abbeville, okay? The people who my grandparents and great-grandparents sharecropped for were a family named Vickers. And they had no problem with my great-granddad and had no problem with my granddad until my grandfather pushed back on the split of the crops and what his family was money was able to get for his family. So this man literally told my grandfather, my great-grandfather Will, I got no problem with you people. My only problem is you got it in the back of your mind that you're just as good as me, and you're not. You never will be. So take what I'm giving you and be happy with it, or we're gonna have problems. That's what it comes down to. It's all about power. People who have power and people who are trying to get to where they be on the same plane as other people. That's what institutional racism is all about. My dad, when he moved to Elizabeth, my mother and father, when they got married, they were looking for a home. There's certain parts of Elizabeth a black person could not buy a home. And you're talking about a realtor, Anthony. The realtor told my dad, I can only take you to certain sections of Elizabeth because it'll affect my commission, and it might even affect my job if I take you to the wrong areas. No one will say it to my face, but they'll call my boss later and say, hey, what are you doing showing those N-words at house in this area of Elizabeth? You know they don't belong over here. Take them where they're supposed to be. Take them down the port. Take them down past South Street. They don't belong up here. It's all about power.
And I'm looking at Deborah, and I'm like, you look at Deborah's expression as opposed to the African Americans on the panel. Like, this is what we know, and you're like, this is new. And that's one of the issues. Like, the stuff that's new to you is stuff that, yeah. And that's been one of the issues. And it's like, you look at Trayvon, you know, you weren't surprised by Trayvon. You weren't surprised by the reaction to Breonna. You know, you weren't surprised by Ahmaud Arbery. And everyone, I'm outraged. And it's like, we've been outraged for so long. And when we say we're outraged, it's like, why do you people keep complaining? And it's heartbreaking.
Yes. I'm gonna say something too. The banking industry too. It's, you know, back and it's still going on now. And certain banks used to, if you was Afro-American, you got different loan rate. If you're Caucasian, you had a better rate. And that's going on. I think that's still going on today. And that's not really fair.
It's definitely going on today.
It's not fair. That's not right. And we have to make a change. And this been going on for many years and years and years. We've been depressed for million years and continue. But I believe one day it's going to be all straightened out, because we should not worry about what color you are, what you do, because people should realize who we are, because we're all family. But that's still going on, but we're going to get a win. We're going to win. We're all going to, we're going to boast up. All this uprising is real good because it's boiling over now. And now people are learning. Some people are sleeping. Now they're waking up. They see what's going on, and they were going to make changes. So that's why.
When I think about systemic racism, I think of things like, the data. And in every single system there's data. And I'm just curious because I know what I think when I, look at data, what, I always see, even with the virus, more deaths in the Black community. When I look at schools, least performing Black students. When I look at the judicial system, more incarcerations, Black men. I know how I feel. And I just wonder because, Anthony just said, like, Debbie, I'm just curious, like, how do you guys see it? Like, anybody else? Just curious.
Well, I'm going to, it's actually a combo answer because Keith mentioned banks, and without mentioning the bank in town that my husband and I frequent often. And, I know everything has gone electronic, but occasionally we make that appearance in the bank to do a transaction. And we're asked for several pieces of ID when really only what's required is maybe just your license or even your debit card, but we're meant to show additional information that this is our bank account, this is the money that I'm putting in. My husband was actually questioned when he was putting money into an account, so much so that the bank teller asked me, "Oh, was this payday for you?" Oh, yeah, I'm like, what is going on here? So it's in various forms. When you mentioned, Janissa, about school, I have a Black son as part of my 4 children. And I just knew from the day that he was born that I would have some sort of issue in terms of them wanting to classify him with a particular need of some sort. So I was always had that in the back of my mind that I would always need to defend and advocate for him. And I'm telling you, it's true. What I feared has come true. But because I was prepared, I think he has done well and we've been able to navigate that. So the systemic racism comes in all shapes and forms, some at a larger magnitude, some in the form of microaggressions. So I think we all, people of color, are able to sort of maneuver our way around because we expect it, we've experienced it. So it's nothing new to us. It's new to those who are just now hearing about it. I think we often don't necessarily share it unless we're asked to share it because it's just something that we live with anyway.
The code switching that it takes to live in a town.
Right.
Like
That's what we do. That's part of our DNA, Anthony. That's something we're taught, like we're taught to walk. If you're a person of color, specifically a Black person, you live in 2 worlds. You know the certain things you can say in company and other people you can't say in public with other individuals of other races around you. That's something we're just born with. And I went to a predominantly high school, over 5,000 kids in Elizabeth. It was, you name it, we had it. Then I went to a mostly Irish Catholic college. So all those learned lessons from the time I was in kindergarten all came into play in college because I was around people who didn't necessarily look like me, who never had a Black friend, never had a Black person in their house, never been to a Black church. And there I was, their first Black friend. So I had to demystify a lot of stuff, a lot of confirm a lot of myths that they had, and also bring them to reality, let them know it doesn't work that way. So yeah, we live in 2 worlds. We definitely do.
In college, this was a discussion that a person had with me, and he felt comfortable to have this conversation with me. Aren't you happy that your ancestors were enslaved? And now you live in America. If you weren't enslaved, you'd be in Africa.
Dude, I had a priest say that to me in a religious class, that because of the Catholic, now I'm nothing against Catholics, but this is what it is now. Let's just keep it real. Nothing against, he said, aren't you glad that the Catholics and don't you glad the Christians brought Christ to Africa? Because if it wasn't for us, you would still be living, still serving them, praying to the sun and the moon. We civilized you guys. And I was like, with all due respect, sir, you didn't bring Christianity to Africa. The disciples and the apostles brought Christianity to Africa.
Amen.
Y'all had nothing to do with it. So that's wrong. And me and good old Father Davis, we didn't get along very well after that, but the truth is the truth. So I want to hear from Deb and from Fal. Here's my question to you guys. Hearing all this, I know you're surprised because it's it's tough. It's hard to hear, I guess. And Mike, you chime in too, please. How does it make you feel? What's your response to that when you hear that? When you hear that you have these Black people on this panel saying that acknowledge that we live in two worlds and we have to walk a fine line. How does that make you feel? What do you think? What kind of response does that bring to you guys? I'm
disgusted here, hearing the individuals are still, Simone, what you shared about at the bank, it's disgusting to hear that there are experiences that individuals have that are just, it's not right. And I feel like the more that we hear, the more that individuals that are not experiencing this, individual white people hear this, the more that if we hear something that is not right, then we could say something, because it's got to stop. And if I overheard that at the bank, I would have been appalled. If I make a deposit, I'm not asked for any ID. Sure, you want to put money in the bank? They don't say a word. So, but if I was standing next to you and I heard that, I would have said something. I'm not someone that keeps quiet. So, I think that this is really important, that we're learning more and our community is learning more about just even experiences that some of you have had in living in our little town here. And that can help to say, hey, if you hear something, you got to say something.
And I will add on to that, and I agree with what Debbie has said as well. Disgusting is a good word, but that's part of what we're doing here. We're bringing this topic to the forefront, and we're having a discussion about it. Guys, no matter how hard I might try, I could never walk in your shoes. But I'm learning from you, and we're learning from you, right? In terms of the experiences that you've had and raising the profile of this.
But Mike, what I think what's always been wanting to be said was, you don't have to, I don't want anybody to walk in my shoes.
Thank you.
They're terrible shoes to walk in. All I'm asking people to say is, believe me when I tell you something, and that I shouldn't have to show you with video proofed evidence.
Yeah.
And so.
I was going to say, and also the silence. I think the silence is just as bad, as someone can directly say something and do something to me. However, if there is something that has happened, like Debbie said, she would definitely step right in, and I think the silence is just as bad as the act itself, because it shows me as a Black woman where you stand, and that does not feel good, so the words, I feel bad, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, all that is great, but when the actions are different, that's when it's like you're not acting on what you're saying, like you're just kind of speaking, and I think that's the part, for me personally, that's the part that upsets me the most. I can totally deal with someone who says, Janisa, I don't like you. That's great. They don't like me. But because not everyone's going to like you. That's great. But if there is somebody who's just in your face, they're one way, and then behind closed doors or when they're amongst their groups of people, they're another way, that's an issue as well, so.
And the whole, what did you do response to anything happening to someone in the African-American community. We are guilty, we're presumed guilty till proven innocent. Guilty till proven innocent. And, just let's look at some just recent media coverage, So you have George Floyd, who's killed, and people came up, well, the knee on the neck didn't kill him, it was the drugs in his system. You get Ahmaud Arbery getting killed. Well, he was in that abandoned house. And that, I had no idea that people walk through abandoned houses, but apparently that's something that people do. You have a woman storming the Capitol and is like steps away from Nancy Pelosi. She gets killed. Like, oh, she was an Air Force veteran. And, I don't know what happened to her. I mean, like the response, to innocent people being killed. And actually had a person who says that it was Breonna Taylor's responsibility because she broke up with someone 6 months before who sold drugs, to be shot in her bed. It's like, how is that Breonna's problem that she saw a problem, got rid of the problem, moved on, and was asleep? But, people storming the Capitol in an insurrection are patriots. I think that, January 6th showed me that there does not need to be police training. The police know what to do.
Mhm.
It's who, and it was one of the questions that you brought up earlier, Fal, bias. And I actually heard this really good piece, not heard, but I read this good piece in White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. As far as 75% of white people don't have a black friend. And so I can't see the Facebook audience right now, but not your coworker, not somebody who works for you, but how many people have actually repeatedly had a black friend who comes over to their house and visits on a consistent basis? Someone that you could text at 2 o'clock in the morning and it wouldn't be a surprise,
And for an unpaid service.
What's that?
For unpaid services.
For
Like,
unpaid services,
yeah,
not advice,
right.
that your kids
Yep.
could play with, and have a play date with. You know what I'm saying? So, and I was listening to this really good TED talk, and it's like, if you don't have that friend, you need to invest the time to make it so. If you're afraid of Muslim people, you need to make yourself a Muslim friend. So that way you're not listening to what you read on Facebook, but you've actually made a friend. And like, boy, what I read and heard about was ridiculous. I actually put the capital N to learn about somebody else. And that takes work, but that's the kind of work that has to be done, that you don't have to go read a whole bunch of books, which would be better though. Do your reading, do your research, but just get to know people. And don't get to know people with some ulterior motive involved. Make a friend. It's not that hard. And this way you can dispel those myths. So when you're at the Thanksgiving table and Uncle Jim is telling you that all Black people who, if they did this, they wouldn't have coronavirus. Jim, I know several Black people. That's just not true. And you're saying it not from something you read on Facebook, but because you've had these people, I use that word on purpose, in your home. They no longer become others, they become a part of your network.
Right. And so what Anthony's talking about is, with some people other than Black people, because something doesn't happen to you, it's hard to believe, right? It's hard to believe that racism exists because it hasn't happened to you. Anthony brought up Ahmaud Arbery, and I wanted to talk about him because my family is from Brunswick, Georgia, where he was gunned down. My mom passed away 4 years ago, and we buried her next to my grandmother in Brunswick, Georgia. 2 years ago, I went to visit my mother's grave. And so there are two grave sites right next to each other. And so I go to where I believe my mother's grave is, and I drive there. And I couldn't find my mother's grave. So I see a grave hand, and I asked him, I said, I'm looking for my mom's grave site, but I know there are two sites. And the guy goes, are you looking for the white grave site or the Black grave site? And I was taken aback. And I said, what do you mean? I said, my mom's Black. And he said, then she's buried here. And I'm like, is there another grave site that's only whites? And he was like, yes, this was 2 years ago in Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was shot down, the same town. So I say this to say that till this day, there is a white grave site and a Black grave site in Brunswick, Georgia. So now, if we can understand that, we can understand how it was so easy for those people to gun him down in that neighborhood, because there's still segregation going on till this day in Brunswick, Georgia.
Wow.
Do others have experiences and can share some stories, perhaps locally, that you may have experienced? And if you could bring to light, I think with Simone, that was very instructive. I will never forget that. Simone,
I was stopped.
the bank, your experience in the bank. but I know a few of you have some. Earl, you had an experience.
Oh,
We were talking. Could you talk about that? You had a lot.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's two. The one that you're referring to is my episode at ShopRite, I guess a couple years ago. Um, I get it must have been a seasonal thing because ShopRite was wearing their black polo shirts, and I happened to be wearing a black shirt. It didn't say ShopRite on it. It is a black shirt. As a matter of fact, it had my school, Providence College, on it. So I'm walking through ShopRite. This is pre pandemic, so no mask. It's good old me walking through the aisles, and an older white couple came up to me and asked me they're looking for something in a particular aisle, and I didn't know. And I said, let's see. You might want to ask someone who works here because I don't work here. I'm just shopping just like you. And they kind of, you know how now dogs turn their head to the side, like, oh, what's that all about? They swore I worked there. They thought I was trying to be funny. I'm like, don't you work here? I'm like, no, I don't work here. But I'm sure if you ask someone who does work here, they can probably point you in the right direction. And what I took away from that was I took a step back and I realized if you go to that shop right there in Livingston, most of the employees who are the people who are stocking the shelves and working the register and are people of color, are black people. Most of the management, except for maybe two, are white people. And their assumption was, here's a black guy in my Livingston town, even though I had a shopping cart just like they did, walking down the aisles, they assumed that I worked there. And when I didn't jump to their assistance right away, they took it as, well, maybe he doesn't want to help me because he's having a bad day, or maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about, or whatever the case may be. But they found it very hard to believe that I was a regular consumer just like them. Another time I went to the cleaners here in town, Livingston Cleaners. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's a great Asian guy. We talk all the time. He's a Dodger fan like I am. We talk baseball. We have great conversation. One day I was in there, he was helping a customer, and I came in, and he stopped this conversation with the customer and started talking to me. Mr. Smith, I'll be right with you. So good to see you. Hey, did you see the game last night? And I can't explain to you how that customer, who was white's face, his whole countenance changed. Like, dude, you're dealing with me. What do you care about him right now? It's all about me right now. Why are you talking? Why are you treating him so deferent? Why are you treating him so polite and so kind when I'm talking to you? And then I said, don't worry about it. Take care of your customer. I'll wait for you. And he even said to the customer, Mr. Smith, great man, great Dodger fan, just like me. We love baseball together. We have a good conversation. And he looked over shoulder, looked at me like, him? You were talking to him? You think he's a great guy? Who is this guy? And he was walking out, he goes, well, now mind you, this is back when I was kind of in shape. We had just moved to town. He's like, do you play for a sports team? I know there are a lot of jet players live in town. And I was like, nah. No, this a regular mode. It's like you. Oh, okay. Well, have a good day. And he walked away. And that black radar went up. I'm like, okay, I know what that's all about. So I say all this to say, people make assumptions and people look at you a certain way and assume certain things, especially in this town. And I give it the old Al Roker response. People, you know who Al Roker is, the weather guy, commentator on NBC. He even said once that he tries to be the happy-go-lucky, free and easy black guy, not to make white people feel comfortable around him. And that's what I try to do. I know I don't have to, but that's the way I chose to deal with it, because I don't have time to deal with foolishness. I don't have time to deal with racism, whether it be overt or covert. I'm just going to be me. And if I can kill you with kindness, so be it. I think there's a scripture in the Bible that says you can do more harm to a person by being nice to them than heaping hot coals on their head. So I try to kill you with kindness so I can dispel all the mess, all the misgivings, all the fears you have about people who look like me. And at least you can say, well, I met a nice black guy today because I met Earl and he was kind, he was jovial, we had a good conversation. I don't have time for foolishness, so that's how I handle it. So,
Well, I think every black male, professional black male who's gifted with size, has to learn how to make themselves look a little shorter, smile.
Yeah.
Even like you're just sitting there resting. You got to smile when you don't want to smile, not for you, but to make everybody else around you comfortable.
Yep.
But
it's the old elevator. You're riding in the elevator and people get in the elevator and people move to the far corner of the elevator. And what do you have to do? You have to be the one to break the ice. You have to be the one to say, how's it going today? How you feeling today? How's it going? Where you headed? Okay, great. Have a good one. Because if you don't, the tension's hot.
Yeah.
At least for Black men. I mean, I know that for a fact. I'm sure you guys can relate.
Or Black women, it's like, why is she so angry? And it's like,
Yes.
the angry Black woman trope. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always angry according to people. even if I tell them how to say my name correctly, I'm always angry to people. And it's not, I mean, the same way that I am, I'm not an angry person at all. If you get to know me, I'm not an angry person. People who know me very well can tell you that. I'm just a very matter-of-fact person, and I speak my mind, and I'm very truthful, and I'm not angry. There's nothing my own children can tell you. I'm not an angry person, and they know me best. So I definitely can relate to that.
I think any person of color has had a ShopRite story. I think we all can relate to a ShopRite story. I've been accused of being a nanny to my own child. So, everyone has a ShopRite story.
Mine happened at Dick's Sporting Good, where I was sitting in I don't know what I was. And I told the guy, I said, am I wearing a green vest? And he's like, no. I said, that's the Dick's uniform, dude. Why would I know where your shoes are? And I'm taller, so I don't mind getting things for people. But, one woman took it way too far. Could you go in the back? I said, ma'am, I can't go in the back. I'm like, I don't mind helping you. She goes, don't you work here? I was like, do I look like I work here? And you go through that often. But I'll go back to what happened to me in Livingston. And this is why I'm a part of these programs now. This was this summer. And I'm walking to get my 10,000 steps in, just like Earl. I want to make sure that, I'm doing what the doctor tells me to do. And I have my earbuds in and I'm just walking, and it's 95 degrees, so I'm hot and sweaty, but I'm walking, just walking. And I won't say the name of the street, but I was literally a block from my house. And I'm walking. I see a police car coming. You know what my response was? Oh, it's a police car.
Don't walk.
Next thing I know, there's another police car. Okay, I'm walking. The third police car, next thing you know, I get the whoop whoop behind me, and I'm like, what's going on? And like 3 police cars. I'm like, I know I'm bad, but you don't need 3 police cars to take me out, And so someone, and I found out it was a male who saw me walking, said that I didn't belong. 1 block from my home that I've lived in for 10 years. And I all of a sudden became 6'3". I'm about 6 feet, and I was 250 pounds. I'm like the Hulk walking down street. Like I said, and I could have been a linebacker, Earl, and I had those dimensions that he was saying, And the police officer, thank goodness, was apologetic. But I asked the chief, I said, well, if the officer saw me and if I walked past him like it's just another summer day in the park, did you feel a need to stop me? And I'm like, had you stopped me, had I been something else, as opposed to, I was like, you have to respond to the call, but you would be like, well, ma'am, we drove past and he just seemed like he was exercising. That's what they put in the report. I'm like, that need to stop me, I thought, just went over the top, So even though he was polite, it's like, but that kind of showed me the warning that, yes, you live in town, but we kind of have our eyes on you. So you can't be a full free member of the town if you think, do I have to dress, in like, I have to look like some kind of like sports, book model to be exercising, in your town that you pay taxes in for 10 years. And I don't think this happens to other people, that, again, earbuds in ear, walking on the side of the road, cop car comes, I don't run away, I don't make this look, and this is what African Americans go through. And I have to repeat, in Livingston. So this happened on a Sunday at 11:30 a.m. It wasn't.
I walk through town too. I walk through town too, and my wife makes fun of me, but I wear that that yellow vest.
Yep.
I wear that, and I walk in the street, so you can see me and know that I mean you harm. I'm just trying to. I walk right down Route 10. I walk down right through North Livingston. You see me trekking, people who know me honk and wave at me. Hey, I saw you this morning. I'm like, good. I'm glad you saw me. So you know who I am, know what I'm about. I walk right down. I do the loop. It's about 5 miles all the way around through town and back the other way past Bottle King and up past ShopRite and all the way through town. I used to do that every day in the summer. And so people knew me. And that, why do I wear that vest? That's the reason why I wear it.
That's so
that's
funny
what
that
Black
you,
people in 2021 still have to do.
It's so funny that you say that, Earl, because this Christmas, my daughters and I got my husband the full vest. He has the reflector gloves.
Yep.
We even got him this flasher light because he walks. He likes to walk at like 5 a.m. in the morning. And so he'll start out from our house, go all the way down to high school, walk around the oval. I'm like, no, you need to be seen. So we have him basically glowing.
And thankfully, I've been here long, and I've been here, it'll be 22 years in March. I had older kids who went through the school system. I have a 4th grader now. So people know me, like, that's how I know Mike, and that's how I know Alan, through sports. Our kids play sports together. That's how I know Janessa, because our kids went to school together. So people know me, but I'm sure there's gonna come a time someone who doesn't know me is gonna say, what in the world? Who's this guy walking down the street and at 6 o'clock in the morning or at 7 o'clock at night? I don't know who him. He doesn't belong here. He doesn't belong here. Questions are gonna arise. So, like I said,
can I just bring up the topic of the police? I mean, it like is shocking to me that like in 2021 that you experienced that, Anthony, and that also Simone and Earl, that you have to actually think about what you're wearing, because it's just something that, as you know, we don't think about that. So I just wonder, you know, do you feel that, were you educated? Did someone tell you need to?
Your mom.
Mom and dad.
Your mom tells you.
For
your
the
mom
police,
tells
like
you have to look a certain way.
Mom and dad. That's right. Tell them.
And act a certain
Mom
way
and dad
in front
told
of
you.
police.
I tell my children this to keep them alive.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I tell my son who's going to be 21 in April. He's away at school, but born and raised in Livingston. I said, look, if you ever get, I'm sure, Alan, I'm sure you tell your son. Anthony, I'm sure you told your son. And Vanessa, I'm sure you probably told your son as well. Same thing for Simone.
Yeah, he knows.
Hey, if you ever get stopped by the police, it's yes, sir, no, sir. You keep your hands where they can see them. You don't talk back. You don't get smart. You take a mental picture in your mind, what their name is, what their badge number is, and where they stopped you. If they take you in, you go in without any problem, and you call me. Let me take care of it. You are not going to win that fight with them tonight. They're the authority. You are not.
Right.
You will lose every time.
Home alive. Right.
You will fight another day. I got your back 100%. You go along with it, and you call me, and I'll be there. You're on the side of the road. You are not going to win with them.
Let me just reiterate. Anthony Keys, and I'm going to speak for Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. None of us are anti-police.
Nope, not at all.
None of us
not at
are
all.
anti-police. Police have a tough job. We respect, understand, need police.
Amen.
But all it takes is one bad one. And you don't know who that is. You know what I'm saying? So as an African American, the response you're seeing is you don't know even the good one who's having a bad day. You don't know who they are that day. And we didn't need videotape. We all know stories in our community. You don't want to be a statistic that day. So please, 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 let's dispel the image that so if I come up with a Black Lives Matter shirt, I got my blue line. That's like the Knicks playing the Jets. It's two different sports. So
You're right.
if you're getting back at me, I support the blue too. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Keith, I'm going to put you on the spot, Keith. You've been in this town longer than the rest of us. I'd like to hear what you have to think about all this. You lived in Livingston more than all of us probably combined.
Yeah, I had my share too. I just came to town, a couple of years living in town. I went to see a friend over one of the streets in Livingston, outside of town. All of a sudden, squad car come up, 3 of them, 3. I knocked at the door for my friend and told my friend that's going to go bowling or skating. The cop said to me, he goes, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm here to pick up my friend up. He goes, I don't think so. I think you're here to rob that house. I said, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's daylight out. Why would I come rob the house? So he goes, well, you kind don't belong in here, neighborhood. You should go back to Newark. So I told him, how do you know I live in Newark? And I told him, officer, that's not right. It's not right. You pick me up because of my color of my skin. Then he calls the sergeant and goes, oh, go cut him loose, cut him loose. Another story, too, was I was at 7-Eleven in town, because I live here. 7-Eleven. Some lady got out of the car, they were making fun of her because of her weight, and she pointed to me, which I ain't saying nothing, I'm just sitting in my car. They pointed, the lady goes, that black guy was saying bad things about me, about my color. All the cops come, 6 cops come, Livingston. They go, what's your name? Where's your identification? I give our license and registration out. No, that's not color your registration. That's not your car. I said, what you singing? The woman singing me. I didn't say that. I was sitting in my car just eating my crickets like I always did. And then, so I went to the police station that night. I would talk to one of the sergeants because the captain was in. I said, I want to file a complaint against racism in this town and what your cops did to me. No, that's not true. That's not true. I said, I feel very dispersed. I live here. I bought my first home here on Burnett Street. And I said, I pay taxes here. I won't tolerate that. So what happened was it resolved. We resolved it. The officer got recommended, and that was it. So that's the story that I got. I got another story too. And then so you believe me, I do got these stories. I used to work for the town. I worked at the road department, picking up leaves. One of the supervisors, he died now, but one of the supervisors came up to me and said, how come you kind always trying to get things for free and blaming the white people in this? So I got in a fight with the guy. I attacked him. I don't know. I just lost my cool. Wasn't saved it. And then I went to the manager of the garage department, talked to the town manager. But I was hurt and I didn't like what's going on. But I didn't say nothing because I did hurt certain connections, but I didn't say nothing. But I did wrote a letter to the town council, and the town council did nothing. So then someone told me I got to be put back in my place. So that's my horror story on that, or racial stories in Livingston. And I've been here for many years. I have to admit, the community has treated me well. I have to say that they have. I worked at Carnivals for many years, seen the race stuff too, seen women come up and say, well, I don't want that black guy working on my car. I want that white guy working my car. See, I've seen it too. I've seen all of it. I just believe, I don't think it's right. One thing I would say, I'm not a button. I said we have two versions or two things of what we got to deal with. We're going to change it. We're going to change that. So every person, it's going to be hard, man. That'll be in my lifetime, but we're going to have to change that. When we walk out of the house, we're going to put our night hat on. We go and that we, back and forth, different, talking to people different ways. They have to learn the spectrum that we are the same as they are. And the reason why they pick us is because of our color. So they got their color, we got our color. I don't like it when people do things picking us because of our color. And one thing about the bank, I didn't mention names, but the bank does that. People go different loans for Afro-Americans, different loans for white people. That is not right, or brown people. That has to stop because they are equal just like they are.
Keith,
So thank you.
Keith,
So
what you just said was so important, but I think that for a number of people in America, the default is white,
That's right.
Western European, and everybody else is here too. So I'm reading this really good book called Caste by Isabella Wilkerson.
Mm,
And it's
good
like
book.
the stars of the American show are white people, and that the Black, the Latino, the Indian American, the Asian American, they're extras to make the cast look better, but they're all aspiring, or we're all aspiring to be white too. And if you don't fit the, the white, blue-eyed, blonde hair narrative,
Mhm.
you can be here, but don't have any speaking roles. And I'm
Well,
sorry, Janice, I think I
well,
stepped on
well,
you.
like,
and I wanted to add, and I have bunch of stories, but I can definitely mention one specifically about the Board of Education. I know they made their #1 goal, you know, for anti-racism and social justice. And someone reached out to me and asked me, well, why are they worried about Black people problems right now?
Sure.
They should be worried about the virus because it's affecting more races. And she asked me this personally, and I was very offended because racism and systemic racism, yes, I'm affected by it, but it definitely is not because of it's my problem. It's not my problem. I'm affected by it. Yes, my family's affected by it. The people I love are affected by it, but it's not my problem. By no way do I feel like I'm superior to anybody else. I get treated differently. You know, people see me and they treat me differently. So it's not a Black person problem. We're affected by it, but it's not our problem.
You know, I just had a thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead, File. I'll let you speak. I'm sorry. I talked enough.
No, it's fine. I have been just listening to all these stories, and I'm sure it's eye-opening to many people. And I'm so thankful to Mike for organizing this forum. And I'm so grateful to all of you for speaking out and sharing your stories to the community where they may not have heard this, they may not have known that people in the neighborhood are feeling this way and are going through these specific experiences. For myself, I can say that I have been exposed to Black people early on. So I have been aware of some of these issues existing. And I have had Black friends in college also, but I had just come from India. So I came without any biases. So I did not see any difference. And I think people need to get to the point where they don't see difference between people and just see each other simply as people based on their own merit. And all of that will begin hopefully, you know, with more discussions, but the awareness is the key, and then acceptance. And that is what this forum is doing today. And I just want to thank you guys for really sharing your stories. And I just want to hear more, but I just wanted to say this.
I love that, but with one caveat. I was listening to, I don't know how I ended up listening or watching Fox News, not on MLK Day, the next day. I was listening to a gentleman on Fox News, and he basically butchered everything that Dr. King stood for. And he said, well, you know what it was? It was all about the National Guard being sent to the Capitol to protect the Capitol and to protect the congressmen and women after January 6th. And they were doing background checks on all the people in the National Guard to make sure they didn't have any, you know, they have any sketchy background. Because how are you going to be defending something you really don't believe in? So they wanted to make sure before the inauguration on Wednesday, hey, everybody here needs to be here, and everybody doesn't need to be here. It shouldn't be here. And his takeaway was, oh, this is crazy. If Dr. King was alive, he would hate this. You know, Dr. King fought for a colorist society and didn't see color. And I was like, wrong. That is so wrong. And if I could reach one person today watching this Zoom cast, watching this thing on Facebook, here's the thing. Don't talk about it being a color society. That's wrong. That's a wrong way to look at it. It's not a color society. I'm a Black man. I'm pretty comfortable with that. If you're white, be comfortable with that. The whole thing behind Dr. King, at least my interpretation of the reading and studying him for years, was it wasn't about color. It was about the person themselves. He never once said, don't see me as a Black man. That's not what he was trying to say. Content of character. He never downplayed his color of skin. He never downplayed white people's color of skin. So the point I'm trying to make is when people say that we want a color society, no, I want you to see color because that's who I am. I want you to embrace my diversity is good. It's not a bad thing. It's so sad that, and here we are, 2021. We still have to make the statement. There's nothing wrong with being different. Different is good. It helps you understand other people's point of view. It only becomes an issue when you take that and make that a negative. That's when it becomes a problem. There's no problem with saying, I have my background's from Eastern Europe, my background's from Europe, my background's from Africa, my background's from Asia. That makes the world a better place. It becomes a problem when you take that and say, well, because you're from Asia, because you're from Africa, you're less than me because my ancestors came from from Europe, or from from Europe. That's when it becomes an issue. And what I'm hoping today, what we got today, how it ties into systematic racism is when you're in the workplace and you have a manager you report to, and you have a manager who's black, and you have your direct report's black, and your big boss, your director is white, and you find yourself skipping over your direct report to go to your director who's white because you're white and discuss issues on the job, and you don't go to your direct report, and your mindset is, well, I know he's my direct report, but Jim will understand. That's racism. That's systematic racism. When you won't go to the chain of command because he happens to be black, or when you're working online at a bank and you see the black teller and you see the white teller, and you have money you want to deposit, you want to transact some business, and you say, no, I'll wait for Susie. That's okay. I'll wait for her. We go way back. That's race. That's systematic racism. When you choose not to go to that black teller or that white teller, that's what that is.
Earl, so well stated. How you talked about diversity and their strength in diversity, and what Dr. King preached in the 60s, seeing people for the content of their character. So well stated. Guys, I am listening to these stories. I'm listening to your experiences. This is just powerful. I will always remember these things. And I thank you so much, and from all of us, to raise this awareness on how powerful these experiences are. To segue into it, what experiences have your kids had? Right? We're opening this up here.
My son
Yeah.
is 10 and he goes to Riker Hill. And my son has an afro. So, and the kids were like, well, why is your hair so funny? And I think just about every young Black person, I actually went to a school that's, I was like one of 2 or 3 students of color in my class. And the whole, the silliness of hair texture and people wanting to touch your hair, to the point where they have to have a children's book called "Don't Touch My Hair." So that kind of activity happened to my son in school. Minor bullying just because of slight cultural differences. So I've experienced that.
I actually have had quite a few experiences. I know my son, who's in 4th grade at Riker Hill as well. This year, I just literally had to kind of push for what he needed. He, with everything that's going on, and hybrid and remote, and it's difficult for children, and I'm a teacher, so it's really hard for me to keep on top of everything that he's doing or not doing. So I know that every year I always get a request for INRS, and every year the INRS request is different. They're always for different reasons, and I never really understood why. So I, reached out and got my meeting, and it's like everything has to be a big discussion. He can't just get what he needs. I have to sit people down and explain to them what we're going through and what he doesn't get and what he needs, and then he gets it, and now he's fine. Now he's totally on track, and I'm happy, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But it just seems like everything is just so much more, there's so much more work that needs to be done. I know even with my daughters, one of them with the hair situation as well. I'm mixed, so I'm half Dominican and half Black, and everyone in my family has different hair textures, everybody. And, people will say things about well, why doesn't your hair look like your sister's hair? And, and so my oldest daughter, she always felt, a little, she lacked confidence because of it, so those are things that, we do have to explain to our children, you know, again, what Anthony said about the hair, girls too, you know, and the boys, that they're good enough. Um, I'm always trying to instill in my son, like, you are smart. He's like, I'm not smart. I'm like, yes, you are. You're very smart. You know, I always have to encourage him because these systems that are in place are not really designed for him, you know? So I kind of have to show him that you're just as good and you deserve just as much. Even if he doesn't feel that way, I have to make sure that he does feel that way so he can be successful when he's an adult.
Yeah. So I can kind of echo some of what you've experienced as well. So my children ages are 10 through 26. So my oldest daughter, she joined in fourth grade. So she was not part of the school system from kindergarten. But at the time that she joined, I don't know if she may have been the only Black student in her class, actually. So that was very difficult for her to come in fourth grade and not have been able to build those relationships from kindergarten on. So she had a little bit of a rough time. We heard just about everything, from the hair, from the clothes. She was actually asked, you know, well, why do you dress like this to come to school? And she'd come home and tell me, I'm like, what do you mean? You're dressed nicely. And she said, well, that's the problem, Mom. I'm dressed too nicely. They want to know why I'm dressed up to go to school every day. And I'm like, okay. And so then also the hair, you know, why do you wear your hair this way? How is it that you can change your hair up every day? Come home, tell me, well, Mom, why is this? Well, we like to do your hair, right? You like to have a nice hairstyle. To me, it's a very simple thing. You send your kid to school looking well prepared, ready to learn, but then they're hearing it on the other end as a negative. And my oldest daughter that I'm speaking of, she actually wrote an article for New Jersey, NewJersey.com about growing up in about her experience with racism in New Jersey schools, specifically in Livingston. I've had to advocate for all of my children on some level, whether it's a teacher who thought they plagiarized something that they spent hours working on, or whether it's, you know, someone on the child study team telling me that my son needs to be in a special school outside of Livingston, which, by the way, he's on honor roll at Livingston High School. So how can that be? But that's a story for another day. So I've experienced it all. I have one child who decided to sort of assimilate, if you will. So I feel as though she has, I won't say lost sense of self, but she's assimilated so that she can be comfortable in the space that she's in. And I can't say that she's wrong for doing that. I wish that she would not want to straighten her hair, for example, and wear it natural sometimes, but she feels she needs to do this in order to be comfortable. And so, you know, it just really runs the gamut. With my youngest daughter, you know, by the time you get to your last one, you've learned how to parent a little better. So she is my little militant sister. I've strengthened her up so much that I don't even need to speak for her. She advocates for herself. So it's a lot.
I do find myself having to give like the real history with my son. So we have to do a lot of additional historical research, you know, because you learn the stories and it's just like Abraham Lincoln was a great politician. I'm not going to say he was a bad person. He didn't just free the slaves. There was a more complex system that happened. So you find yourself having to do that, you know, sometimes with the teachers as well, you know, and I'm actually, you know, with Mr. Toomey, who's the principal at his school, like, let me know what we're doing for Black History Month. And he's cooperating, but it's like, I don't know if I scared him by asking him that question or whatever, but, you know, making sure that, you know, our topics, you know, are discussed and discussed with empathy. And I think we're the only group of people that they don't ask Black people to participate in Black subjects. So everybody knows it's better than
Well,
we do.
I'll say that I had no idea that you guys were Riker Hill parents. I'm a Riker Hill parent as well,
Yeah.
and it's been a while. This goes back to 2008. The principal at the time, she did have me come in.
Okay.
Her and the librarian, she's retired now, Miss Lombardo, had me come in on during Black History Month, and I did speak to my son's second grade class.
Nice.
Of course, he's in college now, so you're talking about almost 12, 13 years ago. But I did come in. So I did come in and they let me talk to the class. I spoke to the second grade and I spoke to the fourth graders at the time. So maybe we can revisit that with Mr. Toomey, but they are open to it. And when they were in sixth grade, I did the morning announcement. I did the quote of the day over at the loudspeaker, and a lot of kids had questions. So there are avenues. We just gotta, maybe we need to revisit them.
You gotta dig for the avenues too. So that's true.
Yep.
But what you were saying before, Earl, was so important, as far as the color blindness. And I think that I've heard so many of my students say that we're colorblind. And I'm like, if you're teaching your children color blindness, you are doing them a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids are seeing that. That's like saying, I don't see the difference between steak and pizza.
Mm-hmm.
You can enjoy steak without hurting pizza's feeling.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? And guess what? Simone's an artist. Simone, imagine seeing the greatest works ever done in black and white. How much are you losing by not seeing the nuances of the colors and how the artist is making them work? It does not hurt the Mona Lisa that we're seeing the different color patterns on it. You know what I'm saying? And as long as you're making sure that you teach cultural empathy, you are not teaching anybody that pride in what you are means hate in somebody else.
So well stated.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Fantastic use of language
well
and
said.
words, Anthony. Guys, can I ask you, if getting down to in Livingston, and we talked about this a little bit in our prep, the bubbles, right? Deb, we talked about the bubbles. Do you feel that because of the color of your skin, the color of your kids, that people stick to their own? And can I ask, just be very upfront, your kids, they have white friends and Asian friends, and they come into your home and they have that. Can you talk to that a little bit? Any experiences that your kids may positive or challenging?
So I can jump in.
Yeah.
So when we first moved here, I think just like most people, for the educational system. So I knew coming in that there weren't many Black people here, but that was okay. I want my children to be exposed to everyone. So we, take your kid to school, walk them to the blacktop, you see all the parents there, first day of school, you think, we're gonna meet some new friends. No one came over to talk to me. Moving forward towards them, put their head down. Sign to me, you don't want to be talked to. Okay, so now we're in the school, you have that class list of parents or what have you, you're now all meeting on the blacktop at the same time, dropping your kids off. Naturally, now that you have a select group of people that you really could interact with, there's an opportunity. Not so much. You try to make small talk, not really. But the few that would, it's as if, you have the conversation, but then you see them, say, for instance, in the ShopRite, a few days later, or where have you, CVS, whatever, it's as if you've never met. Mm-hmm. So you excuse that a little bit. Well, there's so many people, you can't remember everyone. And I say that to myself, but then I'm saying, hey, it's much easier for you to remember me than it is for me to remember you.
Right.
So you kind of, you take that cue and you move forward with that in terms of your interaction. So from those beginning interactions, I've always been very guarded. I don't speak to you unless you attempt to speak to me. Is that right? I don't know, but it does protect me in the long run, and it protects my kids. There have also been instances, and this is again with my older kids, where my kids were on a team, a basketball team. My girls used to play basketball, and we'd have a neighbor ask if their child can ride with us to the workouts or what have you. Sure, no problem. And vice versa, we've done that. Their children have been in my house. But then you see them when your kids say moved out of, say, the school that they're in and are now in, say, the middle school or what have you, it's as if you never had that connection. You've never had that relationship, as if my child did not play for 2 hours at your house or vice versa. So I just don't understand that. I'm not asking you to be my best friend, but I am going to ask you, if you see me on the street, to acknowledge me.
Yeah, I think it's different because Simone, your experience is opposite of mine. The friends that I have in the town sort of came from my daughter and my son's parents, and we sort of got closer, and we have a good knit group. But that's how I gained friends in the town, is from my kids, the parents of their friends. So that's how so my experience is just different, but I'm sorry that happened, because
Yeah, and my older girls are 21 and 26. So I'm speaking from a different time period. But I honestly, I don't feel as though it has changed that much in terms of my younger children either.
Well,
so
I actually could relate to Simone as well. I really can. I can
Okay.
relate to Simone. I feel like, when people see me, they don't see me, or they try not to see me. That happens to me a lot. And I mean, it doesn't matter if it's my kids' friends' mothers or what. It's just, they just don't see me. So.
I don't know if it's a sports thing or what, but it obviously is different from men to women, because I'm kind of on with Alan. With my oldest daughter, she played sports all the way through Livingston Rec. My middle son did. My younger guy does. And that's like I said, that's how Mike and I knew each other, because our two sons are his youngest and my middle. They played basketball together. I mean, Alan's son and my son Ryan, they're the same age. They were ever on the same team playing soccer, but I will always see them. Hey, what's up, Alan?
Yep.
And that's how we knew each other from that. So I don't know if it's boy, just hope it doesn't sound sexy. I don't know if it's a man thing, but men always seem to find a common denominator, whether it be sports, our kids, our cars, something we can always mesh with. A lot of men in this town people I've made friends with this town over the years, it always came down to sports teams, our kids playing sports together, common professions, either banking or finance, or commonality in our careers, doing fantasy football together. That's kind of how we made those connections. Now, on the other hand, my wife, who is white, she's a teacher. She's very outgoing, very bubbly. So she would make it her business to go talk to everybody. That's how she became friends with so many people and be involved in our kids' education, and being involved in parent teachers, and being in the PTO, whatever organization, whatever that is, because she would go out of her way to be like, hey, I'm here. I want to help. I want to volunteer. What can I do? And made herself friendly put herself out there that way. But I can relate a little bit to what Simone's saying and what Janessa's saying too, because there are times people act funny. They'll see you on the sports field, and then you see them out in either in Starbucks or you'll see them in ShopRite, you see them on Dunkin' Donuts, you see them, it's kind of like, oh, okay. And you didn't speak to me that time, but when you saw me on the soccer field, we're like, hey buddy, what's going on? So it's kind of like, I don't know where that's coming from. So I guess I kind of see it from both ways. But when it comes to me, I guess to sports, that was a common denominator. That kind of broke a lot of walls down. Our kids playing in rec sports and such.
I agree, Earl, and there's so many great programs in sports and others to get involved for young families, to meet others from all walks of life, and to have the kids interacting, playing each other, and you make family friends and learn. And so I think that's great. Anyone, certainly recommend. My kids are older, but same, Earl. We met through sports, and get your kids involved with the town. So many tremendous programs happening. Guys, this is just enlightening, wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. This is a big topic, so much to discuss and talk about. We're just scratching the surface. We've all talked how far we've come, but still the year 2021, we have a lot further to go to break down some of these barriers and to truly understand one another. We had discussed, as we go forward, to what are some potential solutions. Again, big topic for a lot of time, that maybe we can scratch the surface on that, some of the solutions, but to suggest maybe we should have another program just on the focus on some of these solutions.
I
for
also think that everybody needs to invest in reading material.
Mhm.
Everybody in this country needs to read about the past to get an understanding, to stop going off of assumptions or things they learned in high school. You need to read the authentic history. You need to read the sociology of what's going on right now. And I think that's a really good step because you can't really have a good discussion without a common language.
And I also want to point out that there is a very important role all of us could potentially play. And I just saw a documentary on Rabbi Prince, I Shall Not Be Silent. And I recommend everyone to watch that and just to see how we can stand with each other and take this situation or take the ownership of this situation and to see what we can do to be there for our neighbors and our friends. And Anthony, I like the two concepts that you mentioned. One was cultural empathy. It's a great word. I think we can keep that in the forefront of our mind because cultural empathy is a great word and it goes across many races. And the second thing you suggested was that everybody should have a Black family as a friend or a Black person as a friend. And many of you mentioned that we go through the route of having, children become friends and then parents become friends. But why not the other way around? Because sometimes when parents become friends and the families commingle, then children learn uh, about each other. And I think that's also something we as a community can think about and take away from this conversation today.
very well stated, Val. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Guys, as we're sort of wrapping up here as we come to the end, for each of the panelists, if we go around, what are some one or two top line thoughts that as from our discussion, but also what you would like to have our community be thinking about? Alan,
Sure.
put you on the spot, but
No, so
well,
Mike, you
yeah,
mentioned what are some solutions? My opinion, the biggest solution is reparations. And you may say, well, why? Well, again, we discussed the 370-year history, right? Generational wealth was not being passed down at that time. African Americans were promised 40 acres and a mule by General Sherman. That was reversed after Lincoln got assassinated. His vice president took over and Andrew Johnson reversed it. So how we build generational wealth is through land ownership. Well, the majority of African Americans never had that. So I think back to all my friends that are of other colors, they may have an aunt that passed away and their aunt left the money, or their parent left the money, or their grandparent left the money. That has not happened for the majority of African Americans. Normally, when African Americans pass away, we have a meeting. How are we going to pay for the funeral? And then that's how we do it. It's never generational wealth. We haven't built it. And I think it's an atrocity that happened. We had two major atrocities, Holocaust and slavery, and we've never gotten reparations. A lot of people are against it because, but you have to realize that reparations, it happened. Germany paid reparations to the Jewish community 3 separate times. Also, we actually paid reparations. The US government gave $300 to every slave owner for every slave that they freed. That is equivalent to $8,000. So instead of giving the reparations to the slaves, they gave it to the slave owners. $300 each, in today's terms, $8,000 each. So it's a major atrocity. And so we need to understand that this wrong has never been righted. And so in my eyes, that has to happen in order for Black people and descendants of slaves to be able to move along from slavery.
Alan, even on to your point, HR 40, if people could just tell their representative to at least get the bill on the table, so not even the reparations, but even the commission to study it, because we haven't studied the damage, of, what, enslaving someone does, then disenfranchising them for that many years, to the point where you had to have someone like Stacey Abrams speak to people door to door to understand what your rights are. So the reparations and the commissions to study it. So, you know, it's for people thinking it's just throwing money at a problem. It's more than throwing money at a problem. It's also studying it in great scientific detail so that things can be corrected. And we don't just, again, you know, go over the whole, well, this statue is history. You know, no one in Germany needs a statue of Adolf Hitler to remind them that Hitler lived in Germany. So people can say that, you know, and I've heard people say, well, Robert E. Lee, and I'm not picking on Robert E. Lee, but facts are he's traitorous to the cause of the American people. To be exalted as a hero and to have young African, I mean, let's just think about this. If you're a Black person, and this, it just changed, Mississippi just changed the law, but 5 years ago, to be in court with a flag with the Confederate symbol on, do you think that you were going to get a fair shake? You know what I'm saying? That was the justice system just 5 years ago, that we can't get a commission to study, like, what kind of psychological impact does that have? The fact that these statues are put up in not in 1870, but in the 1920s and the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
So your thoughts on some
racist to put you in your place.
Yeah.
So we got to study this stuff. So
yeah, we do, Anthony. We have to study this stuff. And Janisa, what can you hear me? Janisa, you have your mute on. What from today's conversation? What are one or two thoughts? Solutions? What would you like people to take away from today?
Well, I know one thing that I've noticed, you know, because I've been much more involved in the community, and one thing that I've noticed is that people feel like if they're just doing good, that it's good enough. And you know, some people feel like if I volunteer, then that's good enough. What happens is it's not always good enough for everybody. And I think that's something that, you know, people need to inwardly look within themselves. And I agree with Anthony, you know, as far as reading, absolutely. I'm always in meetings and Zoom meetings. Now we have the luxury of getting Zoom calls. You know, I was a part of Wilkerson's. She was, where was it, Anthony? In California, right?
Yes, University of California, Santa Barbara.
Yeah, and so we sat in on one of her sessions, and it was great. Like and one thing that she said to me was like, oh yeah, she said, why is it that in the United States we have to have a Black History Month? You know, are we saying that we're not Black Americans? Like, that to me, that was something that kind of just, you know, stuck out. And while it is important because it's not embedded in our curriculums, in our curriculi, I think it is definitely important to make sure that we are educating ourselves and our families properly, because some people think they're getting everything that they need in school, and that's not true. You know, so I definitely think those are the two biggest things to me.
Simone, how about you? This conversation, what are your thoughts?
So it's a very heavy topic, and it has many different layers and levels. And I'm thinking in terms of just on a grassroots level, what can our Caucasian neighbors do in this community on their corner? Just start by having conversations, to start by seeing people, being open to understanding what someone is experiencing and not excuse it as, oh, that's just ridiculous, that doesn't happen here. Listen and have a takeaway and how you can change that. So just on a very, very simple level, just have conversations.
Well put, Simone, and we will continue these conversations. Very enlightening here today. Mr. Hines, what are your thoughts? As Simone just said, a lot of layers to this. What comes to mind about today?
I believe with her. I so believe with Nisa. I also believe with Mr. Keys. Education, we need to be, not us, because we live in, but Caucasian, other people have to pick up the books and read and take in what we got involved in. They have to learn. Learning is very important. I do agree with Mr. Keys. You have to learn, look at a thing. Don't take a negative attitude about it, but learn what happened. I'm reading a book called The New Jim Crow. Just start
Mm.
picking it up. I love that book. I'm reading it now.
Mm.
But we have to learn,
It's
they
fire.
have to learn to understanding what we went through. And then once not everybody gonna gash it, but when they learn, not they, but other people, Caucasian, brown, they learn that you now understand really what went on, not like what the history books tell us in school, because the history books in school, when I was growing up, gave us a watered down version. Now we have the real version, because I think education is the biggest tool for to learn. And once they learn, they can come and grasp to it. So that's my belief. And I believe, well, in my heart, I believe change is coming. May not be now, but it's coming. But I do agree that they must learn things that happened in the past. Like, the Black History Month is very important. To my eyes, it should be Black History Month every month. So pick one month,
Tell
February.
us about that a little, Mr. Hines. You could, on that subject, tell us a little bit. Livingston's planning Black History Month, yes?
Well, we have our Black banner presentation on February 6th. We have different color stories going on. We have with Simone's things are going on. You'll see it on the website coming up. You're going to see it. It's going to be good. But like I'm saying before, it's a great thing we're doing, but we have to be meaningful about it. Like I agree with Janisa that you just can't be playing. You got to act. And I learned something from her too, that she's right. You have to do action, not just doing something to get to glorify your name up there that you do this. But you have to do an action. So I do agree with her. So thank you, Mr.
And that's actually another point that I know we're trying to close up, but I'm glad that you said that, even because even about the banner, Black History Month banner, I'm like, there's a flag flown for everything at Town Hall. They will not raise the Black Lives Matter flag in front of Town Hall. And it's a big question mark to me. I don't understand it. And that's another thing, why?
Can I step in, Geneva?
Sure.
I think
Lisa.
you can help me. Lisa, I'm sorry. You can help us. I want you to help us in that, because we got the banner. We got the banner coming up. Now I want you to help me to let's really promote the Black Lives flag in Livingston. I think we can do it. We can write a
I
presentation.
think we need to do it because
we're going to do it.
When you're talking about the community and we're representing the community, then yes, that Black Lives Matter flag should go up.
I want your sister, you're gonna help me. We're gonna do it. We're gonna raise it. We're gonna do it. So as your open invitation.
As we're sort of wrapping up here today, Earl, I'd like to thank you so much. Dual role, right? Moderator and panelist. What are your thoughts? You're such a thoughtful, well-spoken guy. A lot we talked about here. What are your takeaways? A few thoughts on this, the whole.
Two things, and I'll make it real quick.
Yeah.
It all begins in the home. The church, yes. The community, yes. But I really believe this. It all begins in the home. It's what parents are telling their kids every day at the kitchen table, while they're playing board games, while they're playing video games, while they're interacting in the car ride from home to school, whatever. It's all what parents are telling their kids, because kids, I see it in my little guy, my young son, Ryan. He knows what his friends are telling him. He knows how his friends are when he's with his friends. But then when he hears from other parents, from me and his mom tell him things, it's kind of like, well, they're saying one thing and my friend's saying another thing. I got to decide which one I want to follow. Hopefully he's making the right decision. So far he has, to listen to mom and dad. Mom and dad know better. Yeah. My point is, when it comes to racism, bigotry, prejudice, discrimination, the fix is in the house. That's where it is. The second point I want to make is I'm blessed. I really am, because being that my wife is white and Irish, I'm surrounded by white people in my family and also in my workplace, all around. And the point I always try to make to them is this. It's real simple. I'm not trying to, I know it's hard, because imagine you grew up a certain way and you've been told a certain thing your whole life, that this is how it is. And here comes along this happy-go-lucky, real nice black guy, me, coming into your world, dispelling a lot of myths that you heard you thought were true. That all blacks were lazy. That we want everything for free. That we always want a handout. Oh, you must be here on a scholarship. Oh, you must be good in sports. I bet you can dance. Yeah, I love your curly hair. All those things that you guys always want something. All those things you heard all your life that you thought were facts because mom and dad said it, grandma and grandpa, that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, like Anthony said it. You believe this to be true. And here I come, I'm dispelling all that. I'm blowing your mind now. You realize, you know what? It isn't about the color of his skin. He really is a nice guy. He really cares about my daughter. He really cares about my sister. He really cares about my niece. I see him for who he is, not for all those stereotypes I heard all my life. So I almost have compassion for white people because I see they're kind of conflicted. Here we are saying to the people in the South, put down that Confederate flag. That's a flag of insurrection and of slavery. I know you think that's your heritage, but I'm telling you the real story. That flag causes me pain. When you send my kid to General Lee Middle School and he has to see that General Lee on the name, you're telling him, here's a man who wanted to rebel against the government to keep my ancestors as slaves, and he's supposed to, salute and honor a school named after an insurrectionist. That hurts people of color. So my point is this: the way we're going to fix this thing, thank God, because of technology and because we're closer together now than we ever were before. People are willing to talk down. On the other side, people on their side are willing to be more boisterous now too, thanks to our former president. So we have to battle that. Education, kitchen table talking to your kids, and having a compassion, understand. We're asking them to make a big switch. Everything they've been told for a long time to be true, now we know it's not. They know it's not true, and for a lot of people, that's hard. It's hard to hear that all those years your mother told me that yeah, he's nice, honey, but don't bring him home. Or yeah, he's a nice boy for a black boy. He's nice for a black girl, but I don't want you to date them. I don't want you to marry them. I don't want to have them sleep over them. But why, Mom? But why, Dad? Well, because they're different. All those years of hearing that, now we're telling them that's not true, and we're living testimony that it's not true. It's hard. I'm not excusing it. I'm trying to give it context and give an explanation. So that's how I go forward every day. To be compassionate, but also be willing to teach and be understanding as well, because that's the only way it's going to change. Like I said yesterday, we were having our ramp up to this. If we come across like a hammer, hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, that's going to turn people off. You have to meet people where they are and give them a reason to want to change. And if you do that, like Keith was saying, change will come. So that's all I got.
Absolutely, Earl. Well stated. Your approach is right on the money from my perspective. Again, thank you so much, guys. It was tremendous, enlightening. We're scratching the surface. These conversations are important and valuable. Simone, you mentioned that. Thank you. And as well, all of you. Let's continue these conversations. I would love to, let's bring you all back. Let's talk about additional solutions and continue this and we'll be in touch with you to do that. We're about an hour and a half, so it sounds like we can continue further, but let's say goodbye for now. Bring in all of this learning and knowledge. I want to thank Debbie. Thank you so much for moderating. Earl, thank you for the dual role. Fal, thanks for guest co-hosting with us. Appreciate it. And thank you to each of the panelists. Guys, you're new friends. And let's break down these barriers and the bubbles. So let's say goodbye for now. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. Thank you.